here I'm joined by our incredible panelists, Raysana, Hurtado, Amador from the senior product manager at Intel Corporations, Prabhat, head of engineering at DataStax, Masood, a co-founder and CEO at Tara.AI, and finally Eldon Richards, CTO at International Decision System. So I want to get started in terms of sharing your interesting experience on developing your product from inception to the first release, and this can be the current product that you are developing or some of product that you have developed past few years in your career. So I just wanted to have that kind of the question going to all of you. Maybe I'll get started from Raysana, and then we can move around.
I think something that's interesting about a product that we built from conception all the way, or from 0 to 1, what I found interesting is more about the differences of how different people think. So like between a product manager and an engineer, and marketing and all the different functions, for me, that has been the most interesting learning at Intel. Software product management is fairly new, the product management function. And so I think as I think about all of you trying to build a company or building a company, understanding that there are different functions and those functions have very different ways of thinking about a problem is real, and it's healthy to have that tension. So for instance, I came in, we had a product that was already being developed by our software development team. And I didn't understand why we were building it. And they just wanted to build something cool, and they were already at the how, and it was super, it has all these trinkets in it. And we realized once we launched it, which was only a few months into me joining the role, that it wasn't really a business feasible thing. Like that's a big side of building a product it's cool if you can feasibly technically build it, but is it solving a problem that someone really has? And is it enough of a problem that someone's willing to pay or have a switching cost? And I think that was a very interesting aha moment, because for me, I always go in thinking, why am I doing this? But not everyone thinks that way, and that's okay. So as you go in as a founder, make sure that you know that it's a healthy tension, and the people that you're hiring around you have it's okay for them to think differently than you, and make sure they are. But that was an interesting moment for me, at least in this group.
Right. So maybe Prabhat, do you want to share the similar experience too?
Yeah, well, I have had multiple experience on that line, and that where I've been fully surprised by what I thought I knew I was building versus what actually customers wanted. And I give you one of those examples. So last start of Woodtrick, we had built one product which allowed you to basically get customer feedback from your users. So DocuSign, Zoom are using that product to get the feedback from their customer. And then the aha moment we had was, well, these DocuSign kind of companies, they get like millions of feedback on monthly basis. So there's no way they can humanly look at all the feedback and make sense of it. So we thought we should build a machine learning powered product which can do the sentiment analysis on those customer feedback, do the classification, and it will be no brainer. We'll sell it to them. We built it after a year. Actually, none of our existing customer bought the product. All the customers who bought our product was the customer who had similar volume, like large volumes, but they were mostly like B2C kind of thing, right? So even though we knew based on our own user base that this is what they need, but they were not willing to buy, and it was because they were so used to the product that we had built already. For them to see that analysis done in a new sort of reporting and everything was a big shift. So we were never able to tap into that, right? So this is just an example of, even if you solve the problem day in and day out and try to understand, you think you're building it for them. It's not for them. So then after 6 months of launching the product, we actually focus our effort a lot more on the B2C side of things, where these these users could import their customer feedback data and see some analysis very quickly, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that even if you're the domain expert, what your users need varies across segments. So you just have to be mindful of that. So we learned our lessons very quickly, and then we have to build sort of a different persona, a different persona of the product on that. Yeah.
Thank you. How about your experience on the Eva on your side?
Yeah, I actually really resonate with what Raysana said, in particular about hiring contrarians and people that have different opinions. I think one of the things that happens when you want to build a well-disciplined early product org is that you need to bring in people that, yes, believe in the vision and the mission, but at the same time, they, firstly, they need to be much smarter than you in a specific or a certain domain. And the second piece also is that when you're building out your first product org, I think one thing we also realized was that having the specific domain knowledge from that, for example, for us, it was the developer and the collaboration space. And we found that our early product team didn't necessarily need to have that depth and breadth of experience in the developer space or in the collaboration space. Like a lot of what they had learned in product and built as a discipline could be applied here. So I think one of the things that we did was we really hired for intellectual curiosity and for the first product team. And that's when we went from idea to MVP and to our first product, it was just the founders kind of my co-founder Sayed and I noodling away and talking to users and customers. Then we brought on 10 engineers and again kept noodling away. And what we did was we basically built this early access program. With the early access program, we had very early on, it was about 100 developers using the product. And it was very hard to get those early customers and users. Like we really had to knock on doors and try to get try to use our own networks. And it was interesting because I think once we built that early access program, that's what kind of became the feeder essentially for us to understand like what would it take for these users to switch over from Jira or Trello or Asana, and why would they switch over, and what is the deep value prop that we're offering to these teams. So being able to kind of understand in that early access program, what were the certain levers, and we ran it for about 4.5 months. But very quickly, we started seeing that those users were automatically adding other users from their organizations. The team started growing. And then April 30th was when we launched our V1 of our beta on Product Hunt. So as you kind of think about that, early launch process, and then even building up the team, one thing at least that we did was once we had the engineers on board, we brought on our first early product team as well simultaneously. And that was, and we structured it with that early access beta invites, so invite only. And then from there, we went into open access. So we tried to have as much structure as possible. But I think, you just can't predict either, like what kind of uptick or what kind of just demand is going to look like from the user side. And in the early days, it was really hard to even convince like 2 developers to use it. So that was my experience.
All right, thank you. I'm sure Eldon, you have a very interesting story on that frontier.
Yeah, a couple I'll mention real quick, and I agree with what the others have said about, it's really about solving important problems, right? What problems that people or organizations are willing to pay for, right? In order to have help solving that. One fairly recent one that we did here at IDS last year, right at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, one of my peers had an idea to help our industry. So we sell software to equipment finance companies and banks and so forth. And when the pandemic hit, their customers were under stress, and that stress was uneven. And as different governments and different locations were applying different rules, and the public in various areas were reacting in different ways, it was a very uneven situation. And so these large organizations that might be working with thousands or tens of thousands of other companies that are borrowing money from them, had some unknown amount of risk and an uneven application of that. So this peer of mine came up with the idea for a visualizer for that, kind of borrowed from some of the the pandemic trackers and videos that you guys have all seen. But this was combining data that we had about or that our customers had about where their assets are and who's borrowing them, what industries they're in, where the locations are, how that aligned with what was happening with the pandemic. And we built the product, this visualizer that would allow them to click in, see the hotspots where they had a lot of risk to their business and drill in and see who they needed to contact, who they might need to work with in their customer base in order to keep them whole, keep them in business, and and keep a customer and keep themselves in business as well. We built that product from the day that the idea was mentioned to me to when we launched it and had our first customer up was 5 weeks, which for a 40-plus-year-old company, that was really fast. We're used to doing things on a very different time scale. So that was a lot of fun, but it solved a really important problem. We actually gave that product away for free to the industry to build goodwill because they were under stress. On the other hand, I've dealt with other fun ones that were really large. One of those actually is what Hira's got us introduced and brought me to Stanford to take some classes. We had at my previous company at Recondo, we had a good set of automation products that facilitate interaction between hospitals and insurance companies. And there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes to get medical care paid for. And we had some good automation there, but there was a particular problem that was just emerging to initiate what's called prior authorization. Before you get an expensive procedure done, the insurance company normally needs to give prior authorization. The issue we had was that you needed to answer a whole bunch of questions about these patients, and the data about that wasn't in any sort of structured format. We didn't have NLP capability in our company. So we said, how do we solve that? And we had to do that on a very tight budget. So that actually led me to taking some courses at Stanford, both on disruption and utilizing new technologies, as well as some of the AI technologies. And we built the product and substantially reduced the time and effort and cost for hospitals to take care of that, so they could treat their patients faster and have less risk. So both cases we were trying to solve important problems, but very different time scales, very different amount of effort, and I think that's an important lesson for us as well, right? Is that we want to solve it as simply as we can. We don't need to throw a lot of technology at it per se, but sometimes you do need to do that, right? So.